So one of my cousins came up to me and said, there's this one video where you talk about renting out versus buying your own property, please send me the link to it. And I thought, did I do such a video? I was like, nah, I didn't. And she was like, nah, yeah, you did, And I hadn't, but I realized that, as you start creating content around property, people inevitably start looking at you as the property guy, either in the family or in their circles, right? And sometimes they have things which you aren't necessarily speaking about or talking about on your videos, but it's of value to them nonetheless. And for whatever reason, they seem to think that you've covered it because you're the property guy. That's what you do, everything concerning property, that's you, and expectation is that you've done all videos, even though you've done 30 odd videos only, yeah, which is quite an achievement, I must say. Anyway, let me not digress, right? But when I thought of that, and I was like, okay, if this is something that my cousin finds helpful or useful to know right now, then this is something I should probably think about putting down, because there's probably other people that are struggling with the same decision at any given point in time, and I figured, yeah, why not, let me just not be stuck in my own ways in terms of what I perceive or what I think people want to hear about, but rather be receptive in terms of the feedback which I'm getting, which is quite useful around what people care about at any given point in time. If she's asking herself this question, then chances are others are also asking themselves the same question. So I figured, yeah, let me give my take or my opinion in terms of what are some of the key things that you need to consider whether you want to buy or whether you want to rent out. All right, I'm gonna say it from the onset. I would lean towards renting out, specifically when you're just starting to work. Most people that are asking these questions, I've noticed, are people that are, they've got like a year, maybe 2, maybe 3 years of working. They just started working, and they're quite junior in terms of whatever it is that they're doing, And the question is, conventional wisdom says, don't rent out, because now you're going to be paying off somebody's mortgage or somebody's bond for them, when you could be doing it yourself. And there's a lot of truth to this, but I don't think it's an accurate and complete reflection in terms of some of the key things that you should be considering around this whole discussion, So I would say consider 3 key things. Where are you at the moment? Where would you like to go? And the most important one, total cost of ownership, affordability. Can you really afford to rent, to own your own property, right? And let me start with the last one, which is the total cost of ownership or affordability, right? What most people consider whenever they're looking at buying is, can I afford the monthly installments of my bond, And this is a good reflection as to whether you can afford something or not. But a lot of us understate the total cost of actually owning the property, which is what I call total cost of ownership, yeah? And most of us don't realize there's other costs associated with owning property, over and above the installments that you're going to be paying for your bond, there are other costs to consider, which can add quite a bit in terms of what you pay per month, Such costs are your rates and taxes to the municipality, Every one of us, no matter who you are, if you've got property, you're going to pay rates and taxes, all right? I've noticed from experience, it's anything between what can I say? It's anything between I would say 5% to about 12% of your monthly installments. That's what you generally pay for your rates and taxes, right? Could be wrong, it's just an estimation in terms of some of the properties I own, but you will have to pay something. So if we take an example, you're buying an apartment for 500,000 rand, for instance, you're probably going to be paying just under 5,000. But assuming that you're paying 5,000, right, your rates and taxes will be anything between 400, not 400, maybe 300 to about 600, depending on where you live and the suburb that you live in, because each suburb has its own designated rate that you have to pay for such things. All right. I won't go into water and electricity, because those you'll have to pay either whether you are renting out or whether you are deciding to own the property yourself. All right. And on top of this, most of us will probably start owning property with a sectional title, which could be a flat, an apartment, or like a house in an estate. Yeah. And you will definitely be paying levies, which is the one expense which is the most annoying to me. All right. But my feelings aside around it. Yeah. And for your levies, I've seen, in my case, there's been times where I've seen people pay up to 30% of their monthly bond installments towards levies, and levies are like the cost that you pay, the complex or the body corporate, in terms of managing the space, the common space for everybody. It could be making sure that the building is in good condition. If there's any painting that needs to be done, it's there. Paying for security, paying for the upkeep and maintenance of the space, or that general space that is made available for everybody, and insurance for everybody, basically. Yeah. So if you are making an estimation, in my case, I would say you'd probably pay, let's say 1,000. If your property is worth 500,000, you would be paying 1,000 a month for levies. And the one annoying thing with levies, and just about every body corporate is consistent with this, is they are always increasing regardless of what's happening in the broader economy. Rates for some reason will always increase, and for the most part they will increase by 10%, and if you're paying 1,000 now, essentially means next year you can be assured that you're going to be paying 1,100, and it will keep adding and adding over time, and it adds up over time. So that's something that you should definitely consider, type of thing. Yeah. And on top of that, if you are buying a property through a bond, most banks will probably require you to take some kind of life insurance or bond protection plan or insurance, So that's another 300 or 200, depending on where and how big your property is, So these costs obviously start to pile up. So instead of you paying the initial 500 rands that you thought you would be paying, 5,000, sorry, that you thought you'd be paying, you could very well end up paying 7,000, for instance, for the property, when in actual fact, you could be renting out the same space for about 4,500 or even 5,000. So there is those dynamics to consider, right? So this is like the baseline, this is what determines whether you're going to afford or not, all right? But on top of that, which I sometimes feel people overlook, is what is it that you're trying to achieve and where are you at the moment, If you're just starting out, you're not really sure if you're going to be with that company for a long time, it might not be in your best interest to buy a property based on where you're going to be working. Most of us buy property, especially initially, based on where we're going to be working. If you're going to be working in Sandton, then you buy a property in the suburbs around Sandton, for instance. Same thing if you are in Kempton Park or wherever, right? And you don't realize this, but there is a good chance that you might be moving in terms of where you're working, and the counter argument for this is to say, but you can always rent it out. And I think this is a mistake, because when you buy property for yourself, it tends to be a very emotive process, and it's not an investment driven or investment mindset driven process, and because you're buying for yourself, you're going to want to be comfortable, you're going to do what, and you're comfortable paying more for things which unnecessarily things that would work very well for investment properties, and therefore if you start renting the space out, 80% of us will still have to put in some money in this property in order for us to continue maintaining it, And when you also consider the fact that initially most of just about 80% to about 95% of what you're paying to the banks is just interest, is it really worthwhile going through this route, when you could be saving that money and actually build up some nice cushion for you to either invest, right, or either buy something that you know for sure that you're going to love. So these are the dynamics that I think you guys should be considering around this, And the last one is, what is it that you're trying to do? Where are you going? Are you somebody that sees themselves as a property owner and investor, or are you somebody that essentially wants to be able to move around, basically, to be able to move around? Some people don't like being confined to one space, which property does, by the way, and be able to move around. At 2 years you're living in Cape Town, another 3 years you're living in Durban, 5 years you're living in Joburg, and you want the flexibility. You don't want property tying you down to such, right? So these are some of the things that you should be considering. Are you somebody looking at staying in one place or moving around? Are you somebody looking at saving up as much as possible and invest that money and then later buy a property? Or are you somebody whose identity is very strongly linked to the fact that they own property, even though you get evicted if you don't pay your expenses in time? So these are some of the dynamics. No one can really tell you what you should do, but it's always important to know what exactly are you dealing with in terms of cost, which is easy to quantify, and yourself. What type of person are you? What do you value? And how do you see your life unfolding in the next 10, 15, 20 years type of thing? So these are all dynamics that you should be thinking about, And if you're really smart, there are ways in which you could do both. For instance, you live in your own space, you house hack, which is a common thing in the US, which I've seen quite a bit of locally, where if you buy a property with two separate living quarters, you live on the one, and then you make sure that whatever you're generating on the other is enough to pay for not only that section of the house, but for the overall houses, and therefore you end up living for free or living at a seriously discounted rate versus what you would be paying if it was just you living in that space. But are you comfortable? Are you somebody that's comfortable sharing your space with strangers? Dynamics, So it's not a clear-cut answer. Nobody should tell you that you should own your property and not pay anyone's bond, or nobody should tell you that you are wasting money because you're buying your own property. It comes down to you. What is it that you want? What do you want? What can you afford? And where would you like to be in the next X amount of years? Yeah, I hope that makes sense. I hope you find value in this, and I'm happy to take some input. If you want me to discuss something which I am familiar with within the property space, I'm happy to do so. I'm happy to take some of the feedback from you guys so that whatever I am putting out to you guys is actually adding value in terms of the problems and the challenges that you are currently facing. I'm Seth, and that's my name, co-founder of Pink Property Group. I'll see you guys in the next segment, episode, video, whatever. Sharp.